the network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is EDtech, episode number 5, recorded Thursday, May 24th, 2012. Greg Brown, I'm in charge. It's time for the education show from AVNation EDtech. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're listening to this wonderful podcast. My name is Tim Albright, your host. Thank you so much for joining us. This is the education-based, focused, and specialized podcast from the guys that give you AVNation. With us, as always, is Matthew Silverman. He is from George Mason University. How are you, sir?
Very good. Thanks for having me.
Due north of Matthew by about 20,000 hours in the cold rotunda of Maine. Scott Tyner is from Bates College. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Tim. Thanks for having me.
Is it still like 40 degrees there?
No, it's like 85 and humid today,
wow.
actually.
Holy cow.
Seasons just turn like a light switch up here.
Well, and then you've got the other guy's weather, which is Greg Brown from UCLA. How are you, sir?
Hey, Tim. Hey, Matt. Scott. Doing just fine. It's about 70 and sunny, pretty much like it is every day out here.
I live in St. Louis, so I'm with Tyner. It could flip like a light switch. So today we're going to talk about some Crestron stuff, both some streaming and also if you are a Crestron user, some a neat little group that you can get yourself involved in. Audio in the classroom from AVB, and also any other kind of tips and tricks and what we think that you should do in your classroom, and also my least favorite product I've seen probably in the last year or so. And I'll get to that in a second. But first, NHK has been in the news lately. Last week, actually on the AV Week podcast, we talked about the fact that they were broadcasting in 4K. Why is that important? Well, it's important if you do any kind of over-the-air stuff. But also, they have released, or they're meeting, rather, to define, the ITU is meeting to define 4K and 8K parameters. Now, this is in conjunction with NHK's high vision equipment. But Matt, is this just kind of the next step from XGA and UXGA and all this stuff, and we're just kind of getting together and saying this is the resolution for 4K or 8K, or are these guys kind of spinning their wheels, not really, just trying to put something out there to see if it sticks?
No, I think this is actually great. One of the terms that always makes me laugh is when I hear full HD.
Yeah.
A wonderful, wonderful marketing term, which means absolutely nothing except confusing people. So having the ITU meet as a standards body and actually define what 4K and 8K actually mean as a resolution, I think is fantastic. So that way, people know what to expect when they start working in higher resolutions, and content is standardized. I mean, I look at kind of the space that a lot of us operate in right now in our classrooms, that WUXGA or WXGA or WSXGA, all of which are kind of made up on the fly by individual manufacturers, and it just makes it very difficult to support.
So Scott, does this mean that we're going to get rid of the moniker HD? Because, Matt's right. HD is what? A higher definition than what? Now we have 4K and 8K, which technically is higher definition than, 1080p, right?
Yeah, the honest truth from me is I have not been keeping up with this, and so I'm curious to know from any of you guys that have looked into it is how long before I actually have to answer these questions and deal with it, because I have no idea.
We'll all have an early adopter call us next week.
Yeah. Let's see. Anybody that we know that's in the government? Because none of us have the budget to buy an 8K.
We'll have some crazy professor who's decided the only way he can now teach is via 4K or 8K.
He probably because he read some paper somewhere that said red is the only way to go.
Right.
It makes me wonder about the art history faculty and the like who we're still trying to get away from slide projectors, and will this resolution,
Amen, brother,
finally satisfy them?
No. No. You know why? Because there's only one way to play True Grit, and that's on VHS. So, sorry.
That's actually one of our test discs.
See, I don't know. There are still professors, and God love them. I go to their retirement parties every year going, okay, that's one less person I have to worry about a VHS tape deck. Okay, there's 1, 2. Okay, no, I don't have to buy 2 tape deck this year. Okay, cool.
The only issue I have about that is that I think they're right about slide projectors. Slide projectors just look fantastic. And I'm not being facetious.
No, well, yes. I guess in comparison to a PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Did I ever tell you guys the horrible story of my first instance with a slide projector on this campus? It was...
I've heard this, and you told this in AVNation, okay. I think, and yes.
It was horrible.
I'm looking forward to this.
Well, here's what it was. I my first month or so working here at fabulous campus at Lewis and Clark College, I got a call, and the professor said the projector's broken. And what do? We make sure you go there and make sure that everything's working. So I turn on everything, and the projector powers up fine. It's a big honking, Epson projector. The light's fine. Go through the switching, and so I sent him an email, said, hey, checked out everything. And he called me the next day. He goes, it's still not working. I'm like, oh, you're kidding me. So I go there and I meet the guy, and turns out it's the slide projector. I'm like, holy cow, I didn't even know they still made these. I said, okay, so I'll check it out. So I go and get my tools and do everything. And so it's one of these that lowers out of the ceiling. So it lowers down, and I check everything. Turns out that the bulb is busted. The bulb's burned out. So I do my thing and change the bulb. And this is the only guy that uses this sucker on this campus, right? And he teaches microbiology. And that's important because of what the slides are of. So I change the bulb, right? And I turn it on and make sure that everything's set correctly. And it is a slide carousel full of STDs, let's just say. And let's just say there's nothing like a 100-inch version of genital warts.
Oh, my God.
Oh,
no.
Yeah.
In fine detail.
Oh,
less.
Yes, fine detail. You're right. The resolution on those suckers is phenomenal.
Wouldn't want to pixelate that now, would you?
No. So, yeah.
We're in a similar situation here at UCLA. We still have I don't know what the exact number is, but a handful, maybe 20 or so slide projectors out there in various rooms, and it's for the instructors that are in the you'll pry it out of my cold dead hands crew. And one of those is one with apparently this great big collection of airplane crash investigation slides.
See.
Which, I haven't seen, but it's like, I think I can probably skip that class.
You don't. Why do you need that big? I mean, do a handout or something. Send them to a website. I'm sure there's plenty of websites with both of those. All right, moving on to something a little more, less gross. This week on Rave's website, actually, we did a daily rave about this because it just incensed me. The fine folks at Sanus came out with something I'm sure is perfectly usable and is a fine product. Let me start there. I have nothing against them. I have nothing against their product, except the fact that it's necessary. It's a 90-degree HDMI adapter. And I said this to Gary, and I'll say this to you guys, and we'll start with you, Greg. It pisses me off that it's necessary, and it pisses me off that it's still not captive. And it pisses me off because it's a freaking HDMI, and HDMI is still not captive. I don't care that it's there's content protection on it. I've learned to live with it, and I've learned to accept that. But it still will wiggle free, and you can still get a call at 12:30 in the afternoon in the middle of your lunch because, quote unquote, the projector stopped working, and in reality, what happened was the HDMI just wiggled free and lost connection. So.
This isn't new. Somebody else has been making these for a while. I don't know the name. If I really had to, I could dig them up. But I bought a bunch of these about a year ago when my department decided to charge off into a sort of a I Love Me digital signage project. Interdepartmental sort of stuff, which is the way everything seems to be done here. We don't have anything sort of cross campus, and and boy, there's not a lot of space behind a great big flat panel when once you mount it on the wall. And I saw those and I bought a bunch, like I said, maybe about a year ago, and used a couple of them, and so I was sort of. Yeah, it's a neat, obnoxious little necessity, which is, I guess, sort of how you classify a lot of things we deal with here in our little world.
Yeah, and Gary brought up the fact that Extron has their little, zip tie, make sure it whatever the stupid thing's called. It's a thing that you can screw into the device and then zip tie the HDMI connector on, and that's fine.
And there are a couple different versions of those out there too.
Yeah, but I guess my thing is I hate the fact that it's necessary. I wish that somebody would overhaul the connector. I have no problem with the transport. Again, not a problem with the transport. Matt, is this something that we're going to just have to deal with for a while until somebody does overhaul the connector?
I think there's a couple things. I mean, one, we have, I think at this point, it's like 87 rooms installed, which are digital. Figure at least 5 to 10 HDMI interconnects per room. To the best of my knowledge, in the past 2 years that we've had those installed, not a single HDMI connector has fallen out.
Wow.
So,
but you probably tie wrap them down in some way, right?
No. We do dress our cables to lacing bars, but
that's big. That's big.
Yeah, but besides that, there's nothing that we do any different than we did to VGA. Now, something that may make you happy, Tim. There's a company out there called Perfect Path, who actually makes an HDMI connector, which they have a video. I still don't quite understand it, but basically, it's a latching, locking HDMI connector, and it works with any standard connector. And so it may be that cable of your dreams. I'm not quite sure, but it's at least it's not like having to do something weird, and I do. Or even something not user-friendly. Like, Extron, I think, has a good solution, but if you have to take a tweaker to every time you need to adjust the cable, that's 5 minutes worth of a tech, fiddling in there and trying to hit that little nut. And I don't know. I try to keep those things to a minimum.
Doesn't Neutrik have something like an XLR shell with an HDMI in it of some sort?
Yes.
I think, yeah.
I mean, they've got a lot of stuff like that. I'm sitting here on this website, and I'm wondering how the heck this sucker's locking, but it looks pretty cool.
They have a video with it, which, I don't get it today, but a couple of people are actually reselling them. So a couple of major companies. Crestron's actually one of them. We're not buying them, but yeah. But no, there's a couple of people who've licensed them for resale. So I would assume, given that, it may be a pretty good solution.
Yeah. I know. There's sometimes where we OEM stuff that you're just like, okay, really?
Oh, these. Okay, I know what you're talking about.
We'll put a link on the show
it's got that
notes.
little. Yeah, it's got that little sprung tab on it, which just has some little teeth stamped into it.
Yeah. It basically makes it a lot like a DisplayPort connector, which also has the teeth.
Yeah.
Yeah. My understanding is it doesn't lock in, but it's like a high friction sort of thing. It'd be like the high retention spec power plugs, power outlets.
Better than nothing, man.
Yeah.
So Scott, let me ask you this: after we've gone through, and actually, this is a cool little product. are we stuck with HDMI? And I say that because I have my own issues with it. But is this the connector we're going to be dealing with for the next 10 years until the next transport comes out?
Well, there's so many products that use HDMI, but at the same time, there's I don't even know if we're stuck with HDMI right now, are we? I mean, there's as Matt mentioned, there's DisplayPort, there's Thunderbolt now that we're looking at. Thunderbolt's another one that's non-latching. And to me, what these connectors do even worse is that not only do they not latch, but now you could use adapters to get them into various systems. Yeah. And these things end up going on. It's funny because we've all seen from the analog days somebody who went from RCA to BNC to quarter inch to get their sound transferred from one spot to the next. And it's kind of the same thing with some of these digital connections now. I think that when I hear when we say why doesn't somebody make an HDMI that really locks, I think it's probably because they figured why spend all the time in the spec when 2 years who knows what we'll be using.
Well, the other thing is as you guys are sitting here talking about this, and Matt mentioned Crestron. Are we close to where we're going to say, what connector doesn't matter because everything's done in the cloud then, and you're just going to plug it into a transmitter, and that's going to send it up to the cloud, and the cloud's going to do the switching, and then you get it back into the projector.
I think yes, but I think we're still at that point that all of us are at where you've got somebody standing at a podium with some device. And how do you get that into the cloud? Yeah. I think your transport's all going to be Cat 5, fiber, whatever, Cat 6, whatever the next one is. But it's always that, I've got a laptop that's got XYZ connector on it, pick one.
Yeah. I think even, and I know it's one of our other stories, but even like when AVB takes off, you're still going to be doing your last mile connector with something like an HDMI or DisplayPort, because you just don't need the complexity unless you get something that has some sort of transmit baked in into the device itself.
Yeah. With our rethinking our systems here as we switch over to digital, I've had to have but isn't everything just going to be wireless in another year or two anyway? Conversation with so many people.
Okay, so let me play devil's advocate on that, Greg. Matt mentioned AVB, so we'll go ahead and hit the story here. And the story for us is really there's going to be some training. And Infocom, the AVNU Alliance, is going to be doing some AVB training. And if you're not familiar with what AVB is, AVB stands for Audio Video Bridging. In a nutshell, this is very simplistic, so please don't yell at me for this. But basically, it's audio and video and some other things going over standard network using one protocol. And that means, sending it through actual switchers and stuff, whether that's, HP or Cisco or whoever. So if AVB happens, no, follow me here, Greg. If AVB really happens,
I'm trying.
And stuff like the Tessera from Biamp or anybody else that uses this protocol, and it's going through normal switchers, and the IT guy on the show, which is not me, can yell at me for this too, goes through normal switchers, then couldn't it, in theory, be wireless, just like IT is wireless?
Oh, absolutely. And actually, I'm sure Matt and Scott are going to be able to give you a far more coherent answer on this one than me, because I don't know a lot about AV bridging, but I've seen and heard and read enough to realize that it's really, really big, and it's going to affect all of us. And it's sort of on that list of my read everything you can that talks about this stuff, because it's really important, but I don't understand how yet. And that's sort of where I am. Okay. And like I said, the other guys are going to have much more information on this than I do.
Well, Matt, is this how important really is AVB for the industry, or is this just one more standard that we're trying to get, You finalized. I mean, our buddy Kevin Iselli says the one great thing about standards is there's so many of them. So how important is AVB for our industry and for education?
I think it's one of the pet topics which I follow, and I really think it's huge. To go back a couple things. One, you were almost 100% on your definition of AVB.
Oh, good.
The only thing to point out is it's actually a family of standards. It's not just one overall thing, but it's kind of a bucket of IEEE standards which govern audio and visual over a network setting. Theoretically, it could go over wireless. However, from what I've been reading about it, just to do audio alone, they're looking at 10 gig to 40 gig data requirements. And that's a little bit of a challenge over wireless like right now.
Wow.
No, it's not. We had a story last week where some guy did terahertz.
Okay.
It was like 3 feet, but he still did terahertz. I mean, come on.
And
I wouldn't want to stand in that stream. It'd cook your insides, but go ahead.
A gazillion megahertz, right?
Yeah. And no, I think we'll get there. I do. I look at AVB and depending on what day it is, I say it's either like 5 years away or 10 years away. I think it's somewhere on that like midterm horizon for us. The first people who are probably going to really be adopters of it will be rental and staging on the sound side, replacing CobraNet. And as far as I know, no one has a video product that they've announced yet. This show, you'll see Biamp and I think some other people. I saw another announcement. I forget who it was, but there's at least 2 major companies who will have shipping standards-based AVB product. And the neat thing about the AV New Alliance is it's like Wi-Fi. Basically, it's a third-party compliance certification that says they basically test and stamp the products to say, AVB from company A will work with AVB from company B, which is really awesome. So I just think it's great. Unfortunately, I had a conflict with the training at the show, or I actually really was going to try to get over to it. I think we're, like I said, 5 to 10 years away from seeing this in the education market, but I just think it's huge, and I think it's really, really fantastic technology.
That makes me feel good because we're doing an AVB special next week. I was like, oh, okay. And it got pitched to me by one of my good friends who's a huge audio guy, and he's like, okay, you know what? Here's some guys, whether it Harman and Bosch and Biamp, and so we're going to sit down with a bunch of these guys that are on the committee and say, okay, explain to me, dummy me, what exactly is AVB, and go from there.
So Matt, what is it that's taking such bandwidth for audio? For example, the samples you gave for audio.
To be honest, I don't know. That's a bit over my head on a technical level.
Yeah.
I understand. This is uncompressed, real time, and it may be multipath. I'm not sure.
Right.
But I think it's just the idea of how do you keep it in real time and guarantee you don't lose anything. So it may just really be the fattest pipe they can produce. That's probably, Tim, a great question to ask on your AVB show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I know there's one company, I think it's Extreme Networks, which is one of the AV New partners, who has really kind of been one of the leaders on product-specific like network switch development for AVB. And they've been one of the groups that have really been pushing the barrier and are introducing some of the first 40 gig switch product.
And do you know I'm sorry, Tim, I don't mean to take over.
Dude, go ahead. These are great questions.
Do you know if our switches, network switches, do they need to be AVB certified, or is it just anything?
There is a IEEE protocol. For the life of me, I can't remember even remotely what number it is, but within the Ethernet family of standards, which you'll start looking for on switches to see if they're AVB compatible or not. From what I understand it was last Infocom, I think, when I was at a meeting about AVB, they were even saying people like Cisco is starting to bake some of this into their infrastructure product. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So the idea is that, it may be a firmware update to existing product, but at a certain point, it'll just be a flip the switch and you're good to go.
If you Google AVB and you go to one of the big sites that talks about and explains AVB, which is how I found it because I don't remember exactly what it was. Well, one of the features they had was a link to a page that listed AVB compliant equipment. And yeah, it was an odd smattering of like switches and audio equipment. It was kind of, ooh, this is kind of weird.
Well, and I guess my whole thing is the fact that Matt is right when he says the guys that are shipping stuff now are like Biamp and Meyer and stuff.
Exactly.
And that's the A part of AVB, guys. But where the freak is the V part? Where's the video part of this? And who is it that's going to jump on board? Is it AMX? And are they going to abandon their HD over Twisted Pair stuff, or is it going to be Extron or Crestron or somebody else?
It's going to be Cisco.
Oh, shut up, Greg! Come on.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm with Matt and with what Greg just said, which I think it's the future, but I think it's the future in a way we have no idea about and who's going to get involved in this. Because there are some players in this market that really like their proprietary wires and their proprietary equipment that are going to fight this, and there might be some guys like Cisco who come out and just say, and grab some of the smaller or some of just the audio guys or just the video guys rather than the whole shebang type houses.
And dadgummit, both of you are right too.
Well, I went to these little one-day things that Infocom puts on, like Roundtable, and they have another name for it, and I'm forgetting, and I wish I'd...
Is it Lunch and Learns?
It's the full day sort of like micro trade show. Got a couple of classes before and after lunch, and like 5 or 6 vendors demonstrating. They're going to be local here in Orange County sometime this fall, if I remember right. But I went to one in San Diego last fall, and one of the, by the way, terribly underattended. They had like 40 people there, and
wow.
Go to the Infocom website, find one. There's a couple like every month. I highly recommend them. They charge like $50 or something like that to go, and it was just an awesome day in metal people. But one of the classes I took was this, little hour presentation from a guy at Cisco, and there was like 3 or 4 of us there listening to him about this certification program they now have where they certify AV integrators in using their networking equipment, and part of that was because they felt, well, no, they didn't feel, they knew that someday all the audio and video was just going to be over the network, and everything will run over our equipment. And it was really kind of odd. And I wish I'd had a chance to knew we were going to talk about this and had looked at my notes before we talked about this.
Well, see, that actually makes me kind of smile because, all kidding aside, Cisco is the evil empire, but that
How
makes
do
me
you really feel, Tim?
But no, that makes me smile because here's the thing: when Tandberg got sold to got bought by Cisco, it was one of those holy crap, this whole convergence, IT AV convergence. It's not going to be a convergence; they're going to eat our lunch, type thing. And the fact that they're doing stuff like that, though, means that Cisco is, as a company, let's be honest here, they're primarily an IT company, if they're nothing else, is embracing the industry and is recognizing what you just said, which is everything's going to be over the network. And you know what? We know networks and we know switches, but these guys know the endpoints, right? I'm not the world's I'm probably the world's worst IT guy, just because of the base knowledge that I have. But I get the endpoints, right. I know what HDMI or a composite a BNC connector is, and RCA and unbalanced and balanced audio is, and my IT guy may not know that, but he knows the network. And so if we can get together like that, like Cisco is promoting, I think that's a really cool thing.
Yeah, the impression I came away with was that they clearly understood that they understood their core technologies and that they were going to be largely the backbone of the AV world down the road. But I didn't get the impression at all that they were thinking that someday there would be like Cisco video projectors and Cisco amplifiers, that they would be the company that would sell us all of our pieces of equipment that, like an Extron seems to think some days. And I'm in so much trouble for saying that, aren't I?
No, you're not.
Oh, I will say specifically that program
I love Extron.
Greg, I am familiar with the program you mentioned, and from what I understood, it was about making sure that basically former Tamberg installs and also Cisco's telepresence are done to standards, because it is, from what I've, it's kind of the lack of standards or processes we've had in our industry versus IT. It was trying to find a way to make sure that clients got a consistent experience every time, which I think is a great goal.
Right. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, and it was clearly a program where they had future designs as far as where it was going to go, that it was going to get bigger and there were going to be more levels and it was going to sort of encompass more things down the road. So it was kind of an eye-opener.
Very cool. All right, you are listening to EdTech from AVNation. I'm your host, Tim Albright. With us, as always, is Matthew Silverman from George Mason University, our buddy over at UCLA. Go Bears! And I know I did that wrong on purpose. Is Greg Brown?
Berkeley is the Bears. UCLA.
Really?
Is the Bruins.
I didn't know that. So I'm even insulting you even more.
Well, yeah, and if you went to a college that had an athletic program, that's kind of a key thing.
Ouch.
See, I'm just a Bears fan in general.
Wow.
So. Wow, that's really that. Yeah, and then our buddy.
So much for my appearing on this show.
No,
exactly.
See, that's why I love it.
Anybody out there want to sit in for Greg?
And then Scott Tyner from Bates College. I believe you're the Bobcats.
Oh yeah.
Is it really? Seriously?
Yeah, that's what we. Yeah,
I got that right. And then Matt's the Patriots. So
yes, we are.
Which there are other reasons to dislike that. So it's a football thing. So, all right. So at the
We could talk hockey again.
We could. I actually got disowned by a friend of mine named Bradford Bitt, who works for Harman, who is a adamant and rabid Devils fan, and because I'm rooting for my buddy George Tucker's Rangers. So, no particular reason except for the fact that the St. Louis Blues are out. So. Where was I going with this? Oh yes, classrooms, because that's what we do. One thing that we kind of had on the list here, and I just want to kind of go around it and go off of this post. It was originally written. It was originally appeared on Infocom's website, and the guys over at Rave Pubs got the okay to reprint it. It's by a guy by the name of Mark Mayfield, and the title of the piece is called Future Proofing Classroom AV. And we've kind of been talking about it here for a couple minutes. But Scott, give me like one or two things that when you guys sit down to do your either classroom upgrades, or if you have a new building that you guys have to design or what have you, how do you go about saying, okay, you know what, we're going to spend X amount of dollars, and I don't care what the dollar amount is, it's a lot of money to your college because it's an investment. But that investment has to last a good long while. I mean, our refresh rate is 7 to 8 years, and so I need to make sure that what I'm putting in is going to last 7 to 8 years. How do you go about saying, okay, what technology do I need to put in, not only that is current, but also keeps us, one step ahead of the game?
Well, when we start new classrooms every year, if we're putting in a new building, we'll meet with our faculty and see where they're at. We have a few faculty, as anybody would, who are kind of ahead of the curve, and we try to stay up with them. But when we think of future-proofing a classroom, and I think that this was some of what Mark was trying to get at, it's really not about how do we replace the projector in 3 years. It's more about how do we not have to completely rip out the room in 3 years or 4 years. And so for us right now, it is, and we just did this in a room, and the people were looking at me like I was nuts. It's like put 6 Cat 6 wires there, put 6 over there, and bring them back to a rack location so that it's about wires, and infrastructure. We talked about wireless a few minutes ago. I am the biggest opponent you will ever have of wireless. I can't stand it, and it's never worked for me. So for me, it's about make sure there's wires everywhere, that the infrastructure's there, and that you've really kind of thought through the room for some potential changes. One of the things that we do now, even though we don't put cameras in all our rooms, is while we're redoing a room, we put in wires for the camera. And we put in more than we need to because we know the day is going to come where, that gets asked for. A lot of our rooms will put wires up in the ceiling for microphones. So when the time comes, we can just drop those through the ceiling and connect some microphones. The article from Mark really interested me because so much of it talked about K through 12, which is I don't work at K through 12, obviously, but it's a kind of this passion of mine that public education, and I think it's interesting because one of the things people miss all the time when they talk about public education is the simple fact that they don't have people to plan this stuff, and so I laugh all the time because Bates has got about 1,700 students, 400 employees, and about 40 people in the IT staff. And the school union, which my kids go to and I'm on the school board for, falls about the same size and has 4 people on the IT staff. And
and they don't have a version of you either, do they?
Yeah, no, and so right. That's the thing. You've got people who are computer techs in a school who are being asked to do things that they just don't know, and how can they future-proof a classroom because they don't have any idea.
Yeah. All right, Matt, besides Mr. Tyner's cables, how do you go about, making sure that George Mason is ahead of the curve?
A lot of it is, I guess, trying to predict the future. I know all you guys know I've been a big digital guy since before it was popular. Mm-hmm. And right now I'm a big AVB guy because I think it will be where we're going. For us at George Mason, it's really been dedicating full-time resources to planning and really building an audiovisual architecture. What I found is I'd say our designs at this point have a shelf life of about 2.5 years. That doesn't mean we're replacing them every 2.5 years, but we're moving on to a new installation standard about every 2.5 to 3 years now. We're on, as fixed as we can given budget, a replacement cycle. That was actually something in the article, which if you don't have a plan, one of the numbers I like to quote, and I'm going to probably pull it out of thin air, it's about $6 million, give or take, is how much it would cost to replace all of our classroom technology at any given moment. And for the past decade, it just things like that have been a talking point every time I'm in a planning meeting, in a committee meeting, just to help people appreciate that technology in a classroom is no longer an option. It's become an expectation. And, it's future-proofing is making sure you have a sustained resource to continue to maintain, upgrade, replace as required. I don't know if we'll ever be 100% up to date. I mean, right now of our rooms, we're about 40 to 50% digital. We've hit at least critical mass that if someone needs digital, we can support them. I'm sure there'll be, whether it's 4K, 8K, or whatever, we'll need to support that at some point. And it'll be a similar process. We'll start phasing it in, bringing it in gradually. But when we get on a standardized replacement cycle, at least we can help the faculty understand when they should expect to see the technology in the classroom space.
That's actually a plan. My plan is just to do whatever Matt does, only like 5 years later. So that's just because he's an actual college.
Save up money for 5 years, right?
Well, yeah, just sock this away in the sock drawer and stuff. So.
Oh no, and you know what? They're given different funding models. That's not necessarily wrong. I mean, I look at from a functional perspective. we are probably going to save $5,000 on a room on a basis of like $26,000, give or take, when we move to our second generation digital rooms. And it's probably very close to what Greg's about to install, because we've been chatting about that. And so, yes, there you can definitely save money by not being the first people. Yeah,
that's for sure. All right, Mr. UCLA. How do you, besides moving from Extron to Crestron, how do you stay above the curve?
Well, that's sort of what we're trying to figure out. I mean, that's largely where we sit. We've got, I've got the better part of 200 switchers that are digital only. I've got 3 rooms with, 2. I had one fail with digital capability, and sort of through a combination of a smattering of brilliant planning and a majority of just blind dumb luck, we've got to the point where all of the technology's changed and all of our screens are the wrong size and the projectors are old, and now we get to start all over and replace everything all over again. And that's what we're trying to figure out. And that's why, we're clearly a number of digital inputs, so we have a lot of flexibility moving forward, because it's very hard to say what the thing's going to be in a couple of years, when wireless is going to be big and for what and whose version of it.
Yeah, that's true.
And what in the world is Apple gonna come up with next week? Right now everybody we get emails from students saying, "Hey, why don't you have Apple TV in the classrooms?" Fortunately, I don't have to. Well, I don't know. Maybe if I got to answer some of those emails, things might change. No,
they wouldn't. You just get in trouble.
Yeah. I'm familiar with that metric. So yeah, it's a good article. I think they make some really good points. Nothing really earth-shattering. We're all in the same sort of boat, trying to figure out where we're going.
I think one of the things that I hear from all three of us, and I don't know anybody's willing to just kind of get it out there and say it, but maybe I will, because I know nobody from Bates listens. I don't know that you can really do it. I don't see how you can build a room today that's going to be fully functional in 10 years. And so I think part of it is what Matt said. You've got to make a funding model, and you've got to explain to people why that is. Because students today, I like to consider myself, my son calls me a tech geek, and I like to think of myself as that. But a high school kid, I don't even understand how they use their cell phone.
Yeah.
They use it in ways that are so different than I do. And in 3 years, they're going to be in college. And so I don't, even as much as I try to stay up to it, I have no clue the way that they're doing things or what they expect. And so, we can do our best. And, one of the things I was thinking when Greg was talking is, you got to put in flexible switchers that you can pull cards in and out of and change inputs and the like. But you also just got to realize, what? It's technology, and it's going to be different 5 years from now.
I think one thing that I hear from both of you guys, and I absolutely agree with, is really if you want to build that future-proof-ish classroom, it's more about providing imports and transports than actual specific functionality. Yeah. Rather than put the Apple TV in the room, give them an HDMI port so they can bring the Apple TV with them. And in some respects, it makes it the user's responsibility to support their gear. But as we have seen such a diversification in what our users are bringing into the classrooms, it really, I think, some of that will shift towards them. And with this next generation of both faculty and students, I don't think it'll be as much of a burden as it was for those who were the first to use technology-enhanced classrooms. The other thing, on this whole life cycle that I think is almost fundamental is looking at some of the skill sets we're looking for in our technology management or our project managers. And, as you get to the larger universities, George Mason were 200 plus classrooms. I was actually, you need to look at people who are actually doing the business analysis, doing your projections, doing life cycle management. Talking with a colleague at, South Carolina, He was talking about they have, I think, 700 plus AV spaces they support.
Wow.
And they just expanded to now they have 5 full-time project manager, designer, not support personnel, where those people are focused on designing solutions or implementing solutions for customers. It's very much what our group does here at George Mason, that we're involved with planning and implementing where there's other folks who are support. So I don't know how quickly we'll see that model change, and probably when the money comes back, but I think for a lot of these large universities, it's like any other technology planning. The IT folks often have an architecture group. There's nothing different in what we're doing with what they're doing.
Yeah. And I was being somewhat facetious, but not really. I look at what other people do and then go, okay, in 3 or 4 years, we can start doing that. And so, mine is a little bit of what Scott does and a little bit of what Matt does, and that's, make sure we have the cabling, and then, little by little come up with a plan. So that's kind of what ours is. Real quickly, guys, a couple other stories. One is there was a review of some audio for education solutions, and a website called AV Interactive, and it's a British publication, but yeah, they have classrooms too. So I'll put a link in the show notes for this. And it got me thinking, because there are a couple products that I've never really understood, and I'm either hoping you guys can not understand them with me or show me the light. But also, what do we need? Is the other question. What do we need in the classrooms when it comes to audio? I mean, do we need full-on, audio reinforcement systems with microphones? Do we need these little lanyard things that are the ones that really kind of confuse me? I'm not really sure what the use case for that is, because there are 3 or 4 different solutions people have. And so, Greg, whether it's a small, under 20, seat classroom, or it's a full-on lecture hall with 500 seats, how do you guys solve the problem of having audio in the classroom?
We are still focused largely on trying to get a good set of stereo speakers and a good PA speaker or speakers in all the rooms, and we carry that model down from our 400 person rooms down to we have we have PA, I think, every place, and I think we have program every place we have AV, and really we have PA pretty much every place too, because it's an integral part of our recording for podcasting, and also the hearing assist system we have to put in. So, and I don't have stereo every place, and I got a whole lot of rooms with, in some places 30-year-old Electro Voice, great big black cabinets with 12-inch drivers in them, and it's a curve where we'll have all the rooms equipped now as of this summer, but audio is one of the areas where we're a little bit behind, and we'll be visiting some speaker companies here in the next couple weeks at InfoComm.
All right. Go ahead. I was going to say, Matt, what do you guys do for, like, how do you scale, or is it audio everywhere?
Well, obviously, audio everywhere. Our goal, like Greg, and we do this pretty much, I'd say 97% of our rooms is directional program, which I think is huge. I've been, for the past 5 years, ripping out some integrator recommended 70-volt program audio, which we've just gotten nothing but awful feedback. We do provide speech reinforcement in any room greater than 50 seats, and that's done, with a distributed 70-volt system. So we're pretty well standardized in that. We do try to utilize DSPs actually in most of our spaces. I wish we could spend a little more time EQing some of our spaces out, but we really do try to handle audio as well as we can because it's a very important part of the classroom experience.
And you don't do it because of the press of time and getting in and getting out.
It's more, I think we need a better process at this point to, EQ and really kind of better adjust our audio. We've also found, unfortunately, and I always get yelled at by consultants when I say this, but out of the box, most of the DSPs we use with the basic program is good enough for our classroom. And I actually think I hear a consultant crying in a corner right now. But I will say one thing I'm looking forward to, and I mentioned this before we got on, is SynAugCon is going to be doing a one-day audio in the classrooms workshop at the CCUMC conference this year in October. And I've always meant to get to a SynAugCon event. I just haven't been able to. So I think that sounds fantastic.
And where is that, the CCUMC?
I believe it's in Las Vegas this year. So,
dadgummit, we have to go back to Las Vegas. Darn the luck. Mr. Tyner, what do you do? Do you just give people bullhorns?
Yeah, exactly. I didn't know. I mean, how do you know? I've got to say, the first thing, this article actually interested me, but one of the things that just cracked me up is how it referred to the sales manager for one of the companies and how he pointed out how many teachers are out every day because of voice strain.
Yes.
That was... I'm just kind of like, I don't even know where you got where this guy got that info. But anyway, if you've ever read anything on Rave Ed, Greg Bronson used to do his article over on Rave Ed, and he would write all the time about audio and how important it is, and it's the first thing you should worry about in a room. And I was somebody who just was like, yeah, whatever. And one of the things I realized is I'm actually a very loud talker. But what I started doing is something that he recommended, which is go and sit in a room during a lecture. And I've done that with a room that has voice reinforcement and wasn't being used, and then when it is being used. And just the entire experience of not having to strain and hear what's going on, it's a completely different, more relaxing experience. And so since then, we've been putting in, unless you're talking about a small seminar of like 15 or 20 people, we're putting voice reinforcement in every room we do, because it, as has also been pointed out, it also then gives you that ability to do the hearing assist, and it'll give us the ability in the future to do any kind of class capture we want. But it's just really amazing. Go sit in a lecture in a room that you don't think needs it, and you don't even know because there might be in the back of the room there might be a fan that's blowing above you, and just that little bit of reinforcement is really amazing and completely changes your entire experience.
Wow, yeah. That's one thing I've not done is sit in the classroom while the lecture's being on. Usually they don't want me around when there's classes going on, so I'll just, sneak out the back. So, all right, that's actually good stuff. Here recently, and I saved Crestron to last because I didn't, our very first episode of this show was called the Crestron Fanboy Hour, so I don't want to perpetuate that, so I've saved this towards the end. But they kind of quietly released something. Their Capture HD, which shipped in January. Is that right, guys? Started shipping in January, December?
Yeah, December, January, yeah.
You can stream that now.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, sure, cool, awesome. And Scott, you're the one that kind of pointed this story out to me, and the interesting thing was something that we can kind of kick around, because our buddy Greg is just entering the world of Crestron, and you posed a question. This is going to require programming, right? So if you had somebody put in your Capture HD, the way to do it is through programming. So you raised the question of whether or not to bring your programming in-house. And
right.
You can talk about with whether it's Crestron or AMX or Extron. So how are you guys going to walk that through?
Well, it's interesting, and I brought this up again, not because it's Crestron, but because of that concept about what do you do in house and what do you not do in house. And Matt has been part of a Power of AV for Education at Infocom, and one of the speakers there said something which I hadn't heard anybody say in a long time, which is this idea of doing this stuff in house is old school. We should not be doing anything in house anymore. if you're doing installation or design in house, you got to get on the bandwagon and stop it, and which is completely different than what my perspective is and what we've been doing at Bates. And this release, both the programming piece of it and the fact that it required a firmware update that required you to get into your programming, and also with the DMPS that they put out requires the same thing, says to me, boy, I think actually we're doing the right thing. Because I could sit down after reading about that, and as you mentioned, I actually saw by accident because it was in the release notes for some firmware update that I never read them. I don't even know why I read that one. I sat down after that for an hour and had one of my Capture HD streaming. I don't know, how long it would have taken me to do it, how much I would have had to pay for the programming to get to hire in somebody to do it. So to me, it really answers we're doing the right thing, and I'm curious to know what others are doing.
Well, and I'll be the first to admit this. I am not a Crestron master programmer. I'm an intermediate programmer on purpose. I'm in the process of actually writing my code to get into my certification class. But I'm with you. You know what? Anybody that says you're doing it wrong or you're doing something incorrect by bringing stuff in-house has never looked at our budgets. And I don't mean that to be somewhat funny. It's we say that tongue in cheek, but let's be honest here. None of us, at least I don't have a multi-million-dollar budget, and if you do, I want to come work for you. We're
not hiring.
You know what? You and your bears and you don't have any money. You're freaking California. I know you don't have any money. But that's that was the whole genesis, honestly, of me even going and starting down the whole programming route. And now I feel comfortable enough to opening up anybody's program, whether it's Crestron or AMX or Extron. So that's our our little 2 cents. Matt, you guys do you obviously design the systems yourself, and you do a lot of the installs yourself. What say you when it comes to bringing programming either in house or leaving it for capes?
We pretty much bring it all in house. We have actually a full-time staff programmer, and one of the things we found is because we just weren't getting any long-term success working with programmers or integrators, and I don't think it was specific to the skill set of programmers or integrators, but their goal is to complete a project and move on. Whereas we've started treating our AV program a lot more like traditional IT code, where it's an ongoing development cycle, where we're regularly doing bug fixes in-house, we're doing improvements mostly on the back end. And right now we're actually working on some really neat stuff, which I hope to be able to share in probably about 2 months.
Wow.
But it's just a different development mindset, that we are treating this like you would developing applications. That it's a development life cycle. It's not a one-time event. And so we go through, feature requests. We go through, next week we're actually doing a 6-month plan because we know we have more programming than we have capacity. So it's just kind of looking at that stuff. To the gentleman Scott was referring to, he is at an institution that money is not an issue. And because of that, I know, and they have hired pretty much some of the best independent programming companies in the country, if not the world. They've also have top tier consultants and integrators because they can pay, the Cadillac, Mercedes-Benz, if you will, prices. Even being a large university, we're nowhere near that sort of budget model where we can spend that type of money.
I have a Yugo.
But the other thing I would add, though, Matt, that I think that even beyond the initial program is exactly what you said, and I would even go as far as customer service. We had an example a couple years ago where we had put in a room that had 16:9 TVs, and this professor had this certain situation where he needed it to be 4:3, and so it's like, okay, let's put the TVs can go in 4:3 mode. Let's put a button on the screen. Go to our integrator, put a button on the screen that does that. Well, that's $600 and, a 2-week wait. It's like, no, give me really? And so it's this customer service model, which is in what you just referred to, this idea that this is a work in progress. And when people need things, we need to respond to them.
Yeah, and no, I think you're hitting the nail on the head. I actually know that we did that exact same scenario. That was one of the first reasons we brought programming in-house. This was back in 2003. We trained our first restaurant programmers back then because we actually we got a projector, which was a 16 to 9, and well, it's a 4:3 stretch to 16 to 9, and faculty hated it. And we had to put a button on there, basically, which would unstretch it. And the quote we got was ridiculous, and that started us going in-house.
See, this is so funny because my story is very similar to you guys. I started working here, and one of the first jobs for the first things we had to do was I had to switch out 2 old Barco projectors, and we put in a couple pretty nifty little extra or Epson ones. And the company who quote unquote owned the code to the rooms that we did, by the way, still can't get the code to those rooms, charged me $1,000 to change the code for power on, power off, and switching the inputs. And I have since switched those rooms out myself. The old processors are sitting on a shelf behind me, and I put in my own Pro 2s and wrote my own code because of it.
So that worked out well for that company, didn't it?
Yeah, they got all kinds of repeat business. They got hey, here's the thing.
A good business move.
They got my $1,000. Let's be honest. They got my $1,000, but that was the last $1,000 they ever got from me. So.
Yeah.
And I will say, even when we made the transition from some outsourced to insourced, we did. I think since 2003, we have stated in every contract vehicle we own our code. Mm-hmm. That's a non-negotiable.
Yep.
Well, one of the things that we do a lot. I do a lot of work with the mail group AV1, and one of the things that we've been talking about that ties into this is why not create a place where we can put our programming. I'll put my programming up there if somebody wants to borrow it, steal it, whatever. And I'm sure that if somebody else does the same thing, then you're all helping each other. And again, to help that idea of customer service and moving that forward.
Greg, are you writing all this stuff down?
Oh, just wondering when I should jump in here. We're kind of in a different situation with the way we do everything in-house or have done. All of our design and integration in-house, but it's been a case where we're only responsible for roughly half the rooms on campus, and so we don't have to talk to an outside university to find a group that has been can I say screwed by an integrator? I mean, we got one of the campus departments is getting ready to sue right now for some of the stuff that's gone on. I could rattle off a number of cases where, the outside company came in, did something for them. A year down the road, we really need this feature, and it's like, okay, well, that'll be so many thousands of dollars more. And so, as we're making this transition here now from nothing being programmed to Crestron systems, which definitely have to be programmed, we just completed going through basically an interview process with a bunch of programmers and small programming companies and bring them in and talk to us and see what they had to say. And we're going to outsource it, and we're probably all a little nervous about that, but found a small company that really I mentioned them to a couple of people I know and just got some really glowing reviews and some reports that they really understand how higher ed works, and that there are going to be little changes, and they don't tend to look at those as a way to take advantage of us down the road. They want to do the major revisions for us when they happen. But comments from a couple of schools that use them, that they've really had really great relationships with them. So, I'll let you know how that goes. But that's sort of the path we're starting down.
Well, and I don't blame you either, but I've never heard of getting to the point where you have to sue them, so I just stopped calling them back. So.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. They haven't been getting them to come back to fix systems that clearly were not working. They built them and they'd come in and do some changes, and they'd come in and do some other changes, and they couldn't make them work the way they were supposed to. Large feature sets unavailable or inoperative.
It's Joe Bob's World of AV.
Actually, no. One of them is one that you would all recognize, but I would not throw them under the bus.
No. We don't need that, but wow.
No, I just said we're doing enough of that already.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they probably have some fine groups in other cities too, but the local one, I'm not feeling the warm fuzzy feelings about.
Wow. All right.
Fortunately, they're not my systems.
Yes, they're not. Well, here's what we'll need to do. The first thing we do is we get you hooked up with the Crestron Owners Group, affectionately known as COG, as in, Cogsworth Cogs,
An excellent group.
And Matt is here. He's going to give us, because he's the secretary of said group. Congratulations to Matt.
Thank you.
All he has to do is he has to assassinate the president, the vice president, and the treasurer, and he becomes president. So,
yeah, no,
I'm in charge
I don't
here.
want that job. Yes,
but go ahead.
We're not going to have an El Hague moment or anything like that.
Give us a rundown, because there's a meeting. There's a meeting at Infocom if you're going, but also if you're not going, how people can get involved in that.
Sure. The Crestron Owners Group is a program really a group for anyone who is a partner of one of Crestron's partner programs, like the A+ Partners programs. There's the government partner programs, enterprise partner programs, and it's really a user-to-user group where we have Crestron lurkers who can chime in and help out where needed. We've moved to LinkedIn as our site. We used to have our own forums, and we found LinkedIn works so much better. And if you go to LinkedIn, you look at a LinkedIn group and just search for Crestron Owners Group. It is a private group, so after you click join, someone will verify whether or not you're actually a member of Crestron's partner programs. We're having our annual face-to-face meeting this year at Infocom on the 14th, which is Thursday, at 10:30 a.m. in Las Vegas Convention Center room N250, which is the same room where Crestron is doing a lot of its events. If you're going to be at the Partners Breakfast, it's actually, we're going to be following the Partners Breakfast this year.
Very cool. Okay. Very good. And awesome. if you want to get
involved
in any of that, come by there. We just had the elections for the officers, which is when Mr. Silverman became secretary. So you have a whole nother year to wait for that. But it is a really good group, and it's really helpful, especially if you're just getting started.
And I think the finer point we're not putting on is that they have a big presence on LinkedIn, and that's where a lot of the discussion goes on. And that's where I've been participating. And as a very new Crestron person, it is I'd have to say it's a great place to just stop in and listen to some of the discussions or toss out the stupid questions. There are some really smart people on there, and they love to talk about Crestron stuff, so highly recommend it.
And there are no stupid questions.
No, there really aren't, and I'll almost guarantee any of our folks out there, our listeners, if you're having a problem, odds are one of us have already had the problem, and sometimes we have the problem together, which always makes things interesting. But really throw stuff out there. It's a great user-to-user support group, and we love to get new people involved.
Very cool. All right, that is the COG group, Crestron Owners Group, because, we're all a bunch of Crestron fanboys, so we like everybody else too, but we really like Crestron stuff. We may not all like our education reps, but that's a whole nother show. So
we're not all Crestron yet.
I didn't say we're all Crestron. I said we like them. Do you like them?
I like Crestron, but I like Extron too.
I see. That's my problem. Is I like Extron too. I just wish they liked each other.
And they're
it's like having two.
They're near me, and they know where I work, and so.
Well, here's the thing. It's like having two really good friends that hate each other's guts. And that's the best way. I don't mean to cast dispersion, but it seems like they hate each other's guts. How about that?
I think that's a very accurate way of looking at it.
So, yeah. Like both of you, but I wish you'd get along sometime.
That is a great example.
Can't we all just get along?
Yes. All right. Enough of the kumbaya and you know, and all that jazz. So, really quickly, we will be taping this very show at Infocom. Speaking of which, if you are going to Infocom in the Las Vegas area, sometime in and around the 14th of June, stop by if you would please at 1 o'clock on Thursday, June 14th. Actually, you could go to the Crestron rather. Members education breakfast, and after that you can go to the COG group and go have lunch, and then at 1 o'clock come by the Infocom store, and just to the left of that, that's where we'll be. The guys at Rave Pubs have been very nice, and they've given us a little broadcast booth, and so we'll be taping this live. The three of you will be there, and we might have a couple extra guests as well. So
they can like press their face up against the glass and make funny faces.
I don't think there's any glass. They can throw things at us.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I sure hope it's their faces they're pressing up.
Ah, okay. On that note,
after hearing this show, they might have other ideas.
That one there would be Matthew Silverman. He's from George Mason, also with us. Where's you'll give me your website again, sir?
Oh, Next EdTech.
Next EdTech, and your Twitter is what?
MSilverM.
MSilverM. Also with us is Scott Tyner. He is the illustrious leader of our little group of Technology Managers Council at Infocom, but he's also at Bates College. So thank you, sir. Do you have a Twitter yet?
I do. I use it like once every 3 months, and I don't even remember what it is because it just logs me in automatically.
Never mind then. Also with us is Greg Brown. He is from the fabulous UCLA. Go Bruins. And what is your Twitter?
Good. Very good. Tweet at AVGreg, and Scott made reference to it earlier. Both he and I write occasionally for av1.org. That's av-1.org. Yes. And I think we can all be found on LinkedIn, too.
Yeah, we all can do. My name is Tim Albright. If you would like to follow me in my Twitter, I don't know why, but it is Tim David TD Albright, ALBRIGHT, but more importantly for me and everybody here at AVNation, please go by the website. Check out this podcast that you have found. There are so many others. There's a weekly, there's a daily, and there's a ton of monthlies depending on what your interest is. The website is ravepubs.com/AVNation, ravepubs.com/AVNation. Thank you so much for stopping by. EdTech.